I just need to say again how grateful I am for the message that Hannah shared. It's so powerful. The story of your family, which is the story of many families that experienced hatred and had to kind of hide important parts of who you are. It's very powerful for Jewish people who have had to do that in many, many different situations. It's certainly something that we can relate to. So I wanted to devote a few minutes to talking about what goes on underneath. The people who are discriminating, the people who are marginalizing, the people who are hating. If you look at a still life of a Van Gogh fruit bowl or bouquet of flowers, you see that there's a lot of energy in the fruit. There's a lot of energy in the flowers. It tells you there's something going on. It's not just a flower. It's not just a bowl of fruit. And indeed, the artist had a lot of passionate energy, a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, a lot of burnings of one kind or another. And if we dig a little, then we can understand a little bit more, certainly where some of the resentful and angry and hateful passions are coming from. So I want to start with a story from the Torah. So there were 3 siblings once upon a time. Moses was the little brother, and he had an older brother, Aaron, and an older sister, Miriam. And the Torah describes that at a certain point, Aaron and Miriam started to make fun of, to express displeasure with Moses's wife. And they actually called her out, Ha'isha HaKushit, the Cushite woman that Moses had taken, and they spoke ill about her. Now, on the one hand, this is probably not the first time in history, nor was it the last, where siblings have an opinion about the choice that another sibling makes, whether it's what they do for a living, whether it's on a smaller scale, what they're wearing, or on a much larger scale, the person that they choose to partner with. And so this is what they are expressing, and so far not so unusual. But then they go on, and the Torah tells us that they said, Ha'ach rak b'Moshe diber Adonai, halo gam banu diber. So what seems to really have been bothering them is that they asked, is it really that God just speaks to Moses? Doesn't God also speak to us? There is a suggestion that there's some jealousy at work, that Aaron and Miriam, who indeed were also considered prophets, and Aaron had the role as Kohen, as the priest, that they resented that Moses might have a special relationship with God that perhaps they did not have. So you dig a little bit more deeply and you discover that beneath the gossip, beneath the derision, there's something deeper that's actually going on. So I want to ask us each to think about, was there a time when, if we thought about it, something catty that we said to a family member or to a friend, something gossipy that we said to another friend about someone else, if we look more deeply, was that coming from a place of resentment? Was that coming from a place of our feeling less than vis-a-vis the other person? Because that kind of feeling can certainly lead us to say and do all sorts of things that cause pain, and perhaps understanding it a little bit more deeply can be helpful. And similarly, when we're on the receiving end of other people being downright nasty to us, is it possible that there is something going on if we would only dig a little bit more deeply? In high school, I remember being on the receiving end of some not nice comments. And when I shared that with my mother, she said to me, well, you probably deserved it. Actually, if you've heard enough stories about my mother, you know she didn't say that. What she said was, maybe there's something going on with this person. And she was probably right. She said, take a step back and try to understand that what they're doing might be coming from a place of their own personal pain. Now, I want to pan back a little bit, and I want us to talk about not just the personal, but also the larger communal and societal and national and international forces that are at work. Oftentimes, when people are uncomfortable in their own skin, they have a difficult time with other people who are different from them in one way or another. And that can do with their ethnicity, that can do with their sexuality, that can do with their religion, that can do with their racial identity. There are so many reasons why we might unleash hatred and obnoxiousness in the direction of another person that have more to do with ourselves, if we are honest about it, than they have to do with other people. Anti-Semitism, which Hannah spoke about, is such a ferocious phenomenon, and it has so many different forms. And usually, if you dig deeply, you will find that there is something missing in the anti-Semite. There is something that that person is angry about or resentful about. So the Unite the Right rally that took place in Charlottesville a number of years ago, you had people that were marching and saying, Jews will not replace us. What's going on? It wasn't so much beneath the surface. These are people who are resentful. Other people are taking their jobs. The Jews are leading the charge. They had this whole conspiracy theory that Jewish people were bringing in people of color who were going to somehow unseat these individuals. If you look at many of the pro-Palestinian rallies on campus that are taking place right now, especially rallies in which the participants are actively extolling Hamas as freedom fighters, what you see is that beneath the surface, there is a sense of injustice. And many of these people are casting the Jews and the Jewish state as the oppressors and the Palestinians as the oppressed, which is a deeply problematic and inaccurate view of the situation. And they are doing this because it is coming from a sense of resentment. Now, what do you do about all of this? Just because you understand something doesn't mean that you can fix it. Sometimes people are willing to do teshuvah. Jonathan Greenblatt, in his book, It Can Happen Here, spoke about a young man who was an anti-Semite and who was part of a white supremacist group. And this young man, as a result of conversation with Jonathan and other people, actually did self-reflection and was able to do self-correction. That's unusual. That doesn't generally happen. You can open the door to that, but primarily we need to respond by defending ourselves, by insisting that institutions defend us. And we need to make sure that whatever the ideology, whatever the reason behind the pathology, behind the ill behavior, that we and no one else should be on the receiving end of these types of behaviors. But still, digging more deeply, it opens up a window. When somebody is nasty to us, we can wonder if perhaps there's something else going on. When we snap at a loved one or at a friend, we can wonder if perhaps there's something else going on. When an entire group of people is angry at and dismissive of and discriminating against an entire other people, we can wonder what's going on beneath the surface. And while primarily we have to defend ourselves, sometimes, on some occasions, one-on-one, in the right moment, the window that we see can be an opening to something larger if we're willing, like Moses and Aaron and Miriam, to just dig a little. Shabbat Shalom.